We were one of the only outlets that actually did. A lot of people didn't choose to cover it, and a lot of people didn't choose to look that deep into it. But obviously, in the last couple of days, there has been a lot of Whitey Bulger news. And I just wanted to come on here and dispel some things that are being said. I get a little confused about the media sometimes and about content people. Not all of them, but I just think there's sometimes, just other things you can say. But listen, at the end of the day, the truth is this. Some people understand the prison system and just some people don't. For anybody surprised that inmates were notified that Whitey Bulger was going to arrive at Hazelton are living under a rock. Bulger, 89, as we know, was transferred from a medical ward in Coleman, Florida to Hazelton, West Virginia, which is filled to the brim with gangsters and those who likely would love to have had a private conversation with Whitey Bulger about his dealings with the FBI over some 3 decades. Many have accurately stated that Bulger shouldn't have been transferred there. And then there's this whole other demographic that seems surprised by it. The fact is that Bulger was removed from Coleman USP because of repeatedly exposing himself, masturbating in front of staff, and sexually harassing nurses at the facility. In one instance, he actually threatened to murder a nurse. Now, while one could certainly speculate why Hazelton was the chosen destination, that's a fair question. He should have never been there in all reality. The secondary question is, why was he put into general population and not the medical wing of that prison? Well, the truth of the matter is Hazelton doesn't have the greatest medical wing on earth. There were other places that Bulger could have been sent, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But that's the most valid question you can ask, is how the hell did he end up in Hazelton? The fact remains that 12 hours after his arrival, Freddy Geas and Paulie DeCalgero and Sean McKinnon murdered Whitey Bulger in his cell by repeatedly beating him with a slock. In case you don't know, a slock is a prison improvised device, weapon, where therefore a padlock is put into a sock, and basically you just beat the shit out of the guy with it. Bulger was beaten to a pulp, and then Freddy Geas attempted to cut out Bulger's tongue and pull out his eyes. All 3 have been charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Now, a lot of people are out there saying, well, why were they locked up in solitary? They were locked up in solitary because it was known that 2 of them, Freddy Geas and DeCalogero, were seen going into that cell. So what do? You put them into a cell and you hold them until they crack. We can argue the legal justification of that, but I think the fact that all 3 have been charged now, it is what it is. I'm not about to defend a guy that's locked up in solitary when he fucking did it. That's just the truth. Let's just be honest about it. What we do know is that days before the transfer, the inmates were told that Whitey Bulger was coming to that prison. According to sources, inmates were gambling on how long it would take for Bulger to get killed. For some odd reason, at first, the surveillance camera stopped working at first, and the usual rounds of checking on incapacitated inmates, Bulger was completely ignored. He was laying on his cot, covered in blankets, basically beaten to death hours before anybody bothered to check. This week, the Inspector General laid out a 65-page report on this incident. He found that the prison ignored Bulger's safety, ignored his past history of heart issues, and he found that moving Bulger to Hazelton was a huge mistake that fell on the hands of the Bureau of Prisons. Bulger needed to be transferred from Coleman USP, and in between the transfer from Coleman to Hazelton, he was in solitary confinement for 8 months and had completely deteriorated health-wise. So the argument that we can make is, well, why the hell was he sent to Hazelton of all places? There's other medical wings, Butner USP. He could have gone down to North Carolina that had a great prison medical facility. So should he have been sent there? Absolutely not. But it is what it is. But contrary to agent policies, over 100 people knew about Bulger's transfer, and they do not know who specifically talked, a prison official would state. What else is known is that the prison was well aware that they were placing Bulger in a unit with former associates of organized crime. And they considered it not to be a risk or an immediate risk to Bulger's health or safety, according to prison paperwork, which I find to be just astonishing. Since the investigation into Bulger has been ongoing, officials have stated that they do now have a video where Freddy Geas and DeCalogero are seen entering Bulger's cell with Geas holding a weapon in his hand. So the idea they didn't do it now is kind of out the window. They exited the cell a few minutes later in a hurry, adding to the mounting proof of their guilt. Prison taped phone calls now show that McKinnon told his wife on the phone about Bulger prior to his arrival and what was likely going to happen. After Whitey Bulger is murdered, McKinnon again is caught on prison tapes, basically laying out what happened to, I believe it was his wife or his girlfriend at the time. It wasn't until a back check of those tapes that the prison could really make headway into the investigation and charge him. Now, McKinnon was released from prison, but they had to backlog all the prison tapes, and once they heard McKinnon talking about it on tape, they issued a warrant for his arrest and went back and got him. Any assertions he's a rat or he's talking is just completely fucking nonsense. His own mouth on a prison tape got him in trouble. However, what's going to be interesting now, considering McKinnon had just finished his bid, is if he's going to tell them what actually happened in greater detail. So the odds of somebody becoming a rat at this point, it may be very realistic, to be honest with you. However, McKinnon really can't get his way out of it because he acted as a lookout for Freddy and DeCalogero to handle business. It's just the facts. It's always been known in prisons. If you don't understand the system, they know who's coming into a prison, especially if you're high profile. If you're a high profile fucking rat, they're all going to know you're coming. If you're a high profile serial killer, they are going to know you're coming. If you're a high profile rapist or child molester, the people on your tier, the people in your unit are going to know before you even get there. Those are just facts. Guys who enter the system, their jackets, which jacket is a term for their files. They're circulated from the hacks or the COs to inmates. And they do that for a very specific reason. First of all, COs don't like pedophiles. Nobody likes pedophiles. So if a pedophile, especially an infamous one, is coming to that prison, you better believe they're going to know before you even get there, which is why a lot of times you see pedophiles in prison go to the fucking nut ward unit. They don't want to be on the same unit as everybody else because they're going to get extorted, they're raped, or killed. That's just reality. But the reason why COs act complicit with inmates or shot callers in prison is because there's money that goes back and forth. They want to know who's coming on their tier, coming on their unit, for the whole sake of shaking them the fuck down. That is fucking reality. That is the way the system works. They will exploit your record, like I said, using hacks and COs to obtain that information. And this is why when you enter the federal prison system or even the state prison system, you cannot bullshit other inmates about what you're in for. Because if they don't have your jacket already, they're going to get it from a fucking CO or a hack. And they're going to find out. So if you want to play the little game that you're not a kid diggler, and they find out you are, they're going to extort you, and then they're going to murder you. One of the two. You guys don't understand, who haven't been to prison and don't understand the system and how that sort of operates, is that they will shake down everybody in prison. Extortion is a big game in prison. And if you think for 1 minute a high-profile guy like Whitey Bulger, nobody's going to find out he's coming, you'd be out of your fucking mind. Of course the COs told people. I would almost be willing to guarantee you that there was money that went back and forth. Now, why people chose to kill him, obviously, we know he's a rat. People don't like rats, and that's just sort of the end of the story with that. But once again, I got to be clear when I say this to all of you, is that if you think you're going to hide your charges when you get into prison, you're wrong. That's not how that operates. That's not how that operates at all. They will find out exactly what your charges are and what they're for. And if they can't get it before you arrive, they're going to get it within days. What you in for? That's the first thing you hear in the system. What'd you do? You lie and they find out, it's going to mean big problems for you. And that's just the reality. You just, like I said, you can't lie. If you have sex offenses against women or children, you're going to be shaken down or killed. That's just the way it operates. That's how the system in prison operates. And that shouldn't be a shock to anybody. Why it's a shock to the media or anybody else blows my fucking mind. It's not a shock that they knew that Whitey Bulger was coming. We can make an argument as to why, he should have never been over there to begin with. I think that's justifiable. That's a justifiable argument completely. But, over the years, Whitey Bulger for 3 decades was an informant. He created a lot of enemies for himself, but the biggest enemy that Whitey Bulger ever had or ever will have wasn't the Mafia. It was the FBI. Because he had a massive amount of dirt on not only the Massachusetts State Police, but the FBI, politicians. He had dirt on everybody. And for an introspective look into that, I will encourage every single one of you to watch the documentary, The United States of America versus James Whitey Bulger, which chronicles Bulger's work with the FBI and also the FBI's collusion with Whitey Bulger and all of the politicians who secretly worked with Whitey Bulger. Politicians couldn't get certain things without Whitey Bulger's involvement. And his lawyer went on record saying that if Bulger opens his mouth and starts talking, it's going to collapse the whole entire state government of Massachusetts with all the dirt he had on people. Now, because he never came forward, we can't really say how accurate that was. But the lawyer said he had stuff that had politicians shitting their pants. But for whatever reason, Bulger decided never to utter a word. I don't know what that was. Maybe he tried to parlay that into a plea agreement. I really don't know. But while Bulger, wasn't an informant in every stretch of the imagination, there was a lot that Bulger could have spoken about when it came to wide corruption in Boston and in Rhode Island and in other states. So bad was that corruption that many politicians and officials wanted Bulger dead. You have no idea. They were all terrified as to what Whitey Bulger knew and what he might expose. Political careers could be ended. State and city careers could be ended with just opening his mouth. And in the end, Whitey Bulger left this world in the same way that many of his victims did. And the Justice Department in this particular case and the Bureau of Prisons, good, bad, or indifferent, no matter what you think about Whitey Bulger, have his blood on their hands. And so we could talk about conspiracy theories, and we could say that, Bulger had it coming, and that's fine. But the reality of it is, at the end of the day, the mere fact that someone that high profile was sent to general population and not a medical wing speaks volumes about the Bureau of Prisons. The Bureau of Prisons, for anybody that doesn't understand, are one of the bigger corruptional or corrupt groups. Prisons just operate kind of on their own fucking wavelength. The fact that you need to ask yourself who controls the Bureau of Prisons. Like, what inmate gets sent where and why? And there's a lot of things that go into, well, we'll send him here, we'll send him there. They're not going to send 2 co-defendants to the same prison because maybe they face charges together, or maybe they're organized crime. They want to separate them. But that's a move by the FBI. They determine, along with the Bureau of Prisons, because they will do all sorts of intelligence reports. They'll look up his prison medical records. They'll look up how many shots he's gotten in prison, if he's a troublemaker in prison, and that's going to determine the level at which he goes and what prison is best suited for him. The mere fact that they shoved him in Hazelton should just tell you what time the game was. And how the media can be so shocked that, wow, the inmates knew he was coming. You think they didn't know when John Gotti was heading to Marion? I bet you they did. That's just the way the prison system works. And people that aren't familiar with the system in any kind of way just don't get it. So when I was sort of researching this 65-page report, which I do have a copy of, which we will read and get into over on the paid podcast, it's amazing because at every turn you see the collusion between the BOP, the FBI, and where they're putting Bulger. Reality is, at 89 years old, you are not a threat to anybody other than women, apparently, because that was Bulger's thing. But you're not a threat. Then, given the fact that you're so high profile, you're going to stick him in a fucking tier with guys who have organized crime ties who have murdered before. And you expect that to go well. I've always thought, and I always will, this is a move by the BOP and the FBI to silence Bulger. You know, and I'm not defending him. He was a fucking rat. He got what was coming to him. But at the end of the day, I think that there was a lot of worry over Bulger talking. And it doesn't take any balls to kill an 89-year-old man who's wheelchair bound and can't walk. That doesn't take any balls. But it is what it is. You know, if you don't, rats get treated a certain way in prison. That's just the reality of it. But we can't really question the who, what, when, and where, and why. I think it's obvious as to why he was sent there. There's not many questions one could be confused about here. I think it's pretty much black and white, to be honest with you. So over on the paid podcast, we will digest the 65-page inspector's report on what happened, and it's insane. Just going through 30 of the pages before doing this, I just blown away. They didn't even cover their tracks. They didn't even fucking attempt to cover their tracks. And Whitey Bulger got what was coming to him. 100%. I'm not going to argue with that. Just like I'm going to tell anybody that tries to tell me that Freddy Geas didn't do this and DeCalogero didn't do this, I'm going to tell you, well, the problem is that the BOP has tapes of them doing this, going in the cell. If you're the only one that goes in the cell and they see a Slock in your hand, you come out a few minutes later, it's not hard to add that up. I don't feel bad for a guy who's put in a fucking solitary confinement when he does shit like that. It's just the reality. Call a spade a spade. And then you've got McKinnon who's on the phone telling the whole world everything. You know, prison has a tendency to suspect you did something and they throw you in solitary trying to force you into a false confession. Let's just be honest. I think I can get on track with that. But they knew he did it. That's the difference. They knew it, but they didn't have enough at the time to fully do it, to fully nail somebody. And we can argue civil rights and whether that's, acceptable standards or not. But I've heard some people come out and say, wow, they didn't do it. You're out of your mind. They did do it. Just come to terms with it. They did it. They did it. That's reality. Anybody that lives in that false sense of reality in a world says, wow, they didn't do it. They're just being hoodwinked. Bullshit. They're seen on fucking surveillance doing it. You got the audio calls of somebody telling somebody. You've got other prison snitches who saw what was going on and have started talking. So knock it off with the whole they're innocent shit, because it's not true. But they'll have their trial. They'll get convicted. And that'll be the end of that. Besides, they had nothing to lose anyway. Neither one of them was ever going to get the fuck out of prison to begin with. They're already doing a life sentence. Bulger got what he got. It is what it is. But I'm not going to play the game like some of these people going on YouTube channels saying, well, they didn't do it. They're really good people. They're not good people. Those are not good people. Call a fucking spade a spade. Bottom line, they're not good people. Good people don't gouge a motherfucker's eyes out. It's just the truth. Anyway, so over on the paid podcast, we will do the 65-page report, and that will probably be next week or the week after. So take it easy, everybody. I just wanted to sort of update you on what was going on with that case.